Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Pruitt. I am the Environmental Justice Program Coordinator at Catholic Charities Diocese of Stockton. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm glad you guys were able to really enjoy my presentation at the Catholic Climate Covenants presentation, Laudato Si presentation on Monday. And I thought, because of this, it'd probably be important for me to provide you guys a better one, since the live feed, unfortunately, wasn't able to be recorded. So I'm going to start again. My name is Jonathan Pruitt. The organization that I work for is Catholic Charities with the Environmental Justice Project. And we'll really go more into a little bit of the background of the story. So the late Bishop Stephen Blair of Diocese of Stockton was a huge advocate for social and environmental justice. He always had a vision that there was a need for environmental justice in the Central Valley and also in the diocese. And so it was when in 2005, when the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops had a seed grant of $20,000 for a diocese to really start an environmental or conservation project. Back then, they didn't know what environmental justice was, and so it wasn't called that. No matter, Bishop Stephen Blair thought it was important, and he really thought that out of all the dioceses, being in the Central Valley, it was important to have a sort of a Catholic voice in environmental justice, and what better than to really get this seed grant and start something. And so with no other diocese interested, Bishop Blair of the Diocese of Stockton took the opportunity and had the local Catholic Charities and 10 volunteers to coordinate the Environmental Justice Project. And then over time, the Environmental Justice Project became its own department under Catholic Charities due to the importance of environmental justice in the Central Valley. And so for over 15 years, the Environmental Justice Program or project, however you want to say it, has advocated on EJ issues in both San Joaquin County and Stanislaus County, with many successful campaigns, environmental campaigns, policy wins, and successful local grassroots Catholic movement on EJ. Before we go into the work that we've done so far, I wanted to give you guys some sort of like a background of historical context of where a lot of my work is in, which is the city of Stockton. By the 1850s, the land across the Central Valley of California was really starting to bring in settlers because of, the gold rush era. And so when settlers come in, of course, there's now a need for building towns. Well, once you build towns, now you're going to need to start establishing food sources. And that's when agriculture started to come in. It started to become very big for the agriculture in the Central Valley. But one of the issues that the agriculture was lacking was water access. There actually wasn't a lot of really strong rivers or channels that went into the Central Valley for agriculture to be able to utilize. And it was due to the geographical disadvantage that there was going to be need some sort of planning and designing to find the closest water source and to bring it into the Central Valley. And that's why they actually brought in the Chinese migrant workers. They came in, and Chinese laborers, to provide a sort of a path and to build levees at the San Joaquin and Sacramento River Delta. This was pretty much the abundant source for water. And so they created smaller channels leading and branching down into the Central Valley, and that was pretty much the necessity needed for the water ag and farmers needed. And then, of course, with the lack of the technology and the lack of innovation, it forced the agriculture interests to really recruit labor globally. People of color, such as Chinese, African Americans from the South, Japanese, Punjabis, Filipinos, and Mexicans were forced into labor by employment segregation. Majority of the workers, of course, given that in the San Joaquin County area, Stockton was pretty much the biggest city, and it was growing exponentially. And so with that, a lot of the majority of the workers lived in Stockton, and then worked in the fields and in the crops next to the delta, and of course the huge thing of the asparagus fields. A lot of the workers that worked on the asparagus fields actually lived in Stockton. In the late 1800s, racially restrictive housing covenants were written in housing deeds to restrict people of color from living in certain areas of the city. And then it was in the 1930s that the Federal Housing Administration created color-coded maps to guide mortgage investment. The investments were intentionally directed away from communities of color that were typically depicted in red, which is a sort of a practice called redlining. And I'll give you an example of a redlining map next. This is the map that forever changed and forever shaped the growth of the city of Stockton. This racial and immoral but legal practice destroyed communities of color across the country. Although the racial practice was banned in the 1968 Fair Housing Act, the years preceding contributed to both the built environment and unequal distribution of wealth in the United States today. In addition to the issues with housing, there was also this huge, big industrial boom for Stockton in the 1930s and the 1940s. For one, the Port of Stockton opens in 1930s. And in the 1933 to 1940, it was actually the fastest growing port in the United States, where it started doubling its tonnage every fiscal quarter. And then when it came to seeing that there was a port, an inland port in Stockton, there started to become a huge interest in a logistic industry and goods movement. And so with this idea of understanding the growth and development, knowing that there's going to be, people coming in, settling, there's going to need to be homes, but there's also going to need to be highways. And there's going to need to be some sort of transportation roads that allow goods movement, allow trucks to go across the state and cross cities. And so that's why it was in the 1950s and 1970s, with the anticipation of the future expansion of the city of Stockton pushed and lobbied for freeways. And these freeways were constructed intentionally near low-income communities, low-income redline communities, to reduce the cost of eminent domain. And this was legal. And this was a similar approach done by industrial warehouses zoned near redline communities. And then in the 1970s, the construction of the Highway 4 construction, or the Highway 4 crosstown freeway, it demolished a significant portion of the Filipino-American community of Little Manila, Stockton. And this pretty much displaced what was once the largest population of Filipinos outside of Little Manila, Philippines. I wanted to credit Little Manila for being able to use their photo on the bottom there in the right corner. On the next slide, I wanted to give you sort of an aftermath of what was the results of all of these racial, these racial plans, these racial urban development plans. And in this map, it shows that it's color coded. No, this is not a map that's a redlining map, but it'll start to connect down the road. This is actually the aftermath of decades of racial or urban planning and economic injustice. This map was actually developed by the Office of Environmental Health Hazards and Assessment, or OHIA, called CalEnviroScreen 3.0. And CalEnviroScreen 3.0 is actually a screening tool that the state uses to evaluate the burden of pollution for multiple sources in communities while accounting for potential vulnerability to the adverse effects of pollution. CalEnviroScreen actually ranks by census tracts in California based on potential exposures to pollutants, adverse environmental conditions, social economic factors, and also prevalence of certain health conditions. So data that was used in the Calabrigo model come from national and state sources. In this picture, you see there's a map that's filled with yellows, oranges, and reds, and that's the map of Stockton. There aren't any greens within city limits. The green that you actually see there is not even in the city of Stockton at all. To give you some ideas of what the colors mean, red color means 91 to 100% average score of being disadvantaged with heavy pollution sources and socioeconomic factors. There's so much red that it weighs over downtown and South Stockton. Residents in downtown South Stockton are on average of having an asthma rate higher than 93% of the census tract in California. In particulate matter 2.5, which is a lead to the reason for people having asthma, it causes particles to go into your lungs, and it really causes a lot of asthma attacks and other illnesses and lung damage and down the road. For PM 2.5 in South Stockton, it's higher than 94% of the census tract in California. But why would this be? Which would be what of a question you'd have. Well, when you look at the layout, like I drew on this map, it indicates main corridors and heavy corridors and heavy stationary pollution sources. Look at where they're located. Now that you see where they're located, the next slide is going to explain it all. The map that I have here is pretty much a map. It's credit to the California Environmental Protection Agency, or Cal EPA, and I want to thank them for designing this. Here we have the boundary lines that originated with the former Homeowners Loan Corporation residential security map in the 1930s. The background colors indicate the pollution factors from Calabrigo. So they were able to combine the two to see if there was any consistencies with the maps down the road, the maps from the past and now the maps that we see now. And then what I did was I customized it by including the main corridors for reference, of course. Now, notice how it gets red right there, the red indicating, of course, heavy pollution. It's near the historically red line communities. This is actually no accident. And the thing is, our communities are continuously experiencing injustices from it. So with that in mind and understanding, giving that sort of context, I want to give you guys some sort of what we've done so far at Catholic Charities Environmental Justice Project. This gives you pretty much a list of our past wins and our past work. We definitely kept engaged with local and state environmental justice policies that impact disadvantaged communities. And throughout this time, keep in mind that we are also part of the Catholic Church. And so we've actually tried to bring in fellow Catholics that are really strong in voicing their concerns with legislators and being able to provide some support for legislation that is supposed to be positive. It's supposed to impact them positively, so that they can. So it really brings in sustainable communities, and so that's what we've done. We've brought in pretty much a team from different churches of Catholics, and bringing them to providing transportation over to the capital of Sacramento, and allowing them to speak with their own legislators within their district, either it be their senators or with their assembly members. And of course, as you can see, this slide is kind of a lot. So I'm not going to go over all of it. And I wasn't actually able to fit all of the ones that we've done so far, but there are a few that I wanted to really highlight. And we've actually, again, worked with a team of parishioners across the county in San Joaquin County to bring this important legislation to fruition. And sometimes the way we did that was, of course, have them provide letters to the editor or provide social media campaigns. But for bills that we've pretty much had past wins where we've advocated strongly on, of course, with AB 32, which truly was the start of the Environmental Justice Project's role in civic education and civic engagement. SB 375, which strengthened the California Air Resources Board's authority to set regional standards and targets for reduction of GHG emissions. SB 1000, AB 2722, and also AB 617, which I'll start to discuss in the next slides. In 2016, Catholic Charities EJ program actually developed the Healthy Neighborhoods Collaborative, which was actually made up of 30 organizations and residents with an eye to improve public health through land use, transportation, nutrition, and active transportation. The collaborative became a huge grassroots sort of movement locally and addressed issues with Stockton's general plan update. After 2 years of many meetings, trainings, and workshops, the collaborative delivered policy recommendations for the final comment period. Well, I'm glad to say that after all those years, 34 out of 35 policy recommendations were accepted by the Planning Commission and then accepted by the City Council. The willpower the residents brought to this collaborative was truly captivating, and it actually brought this sort of start to the environmental justice movement in Stockton. In 2019, there was an environmental justice initiative that was started with Stockton or the Cal EPA and a few local environmental justice organizations in Stockton. The initiative itself, it was started as the Stockton Environmental Justice Initiative and leaded to become the Cal EPA Environmental Justice Enforcement Task Force. And in 2019, the task force carried out an environmental justice initiative, and an initiative focused on strategies to address some of the community's major concerns as identified by residents, by city officials, and community partners such as Catholic Charities EJ program. Working with local enforcement agencies, the task force conducted over 200 inspections in facilities and 80 heavy-duty trucks. And by that time, they're looking for violations and, when appropriate, issuing citations where violations were found. And the task force also identified gaps in local regulatory programs and worked with the local regulatory agencies to address them. Currently, what we're doing is the Transformative Climate Communities implementation grant. The City of Stockton, with the partnership of 10 plus partners, organizations locally in Stockton, including Catholic Charities EJ program, was awarded $10.8 million from the state of California to implement climate projects that included workforce and economic development for 3 years. In total, there will be 7 capital projects that will benefit the most disadvantaged communities in the boundary zone, which is, of course, around the historical red line communities of downtown and South Stockton. The City of Stockton also was selected as the second-year community for the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program. This is a comprehensive 11-year program, a state program that focuses on having local orgs and businesses, industries, local and regional government, and the residents plan and implement clean air strategies for their own communities. And the plan is supposed to bring $40 million at least, on average, $40 million of incentive and implementation funding that will lower localized air pollution and also lower exposure rates to pollution. Catholic Charities and Little Manila are really the community lead. The Catholic Charities and Little Manila are the community leads for this process and the development and the process of the community engagement. And I will also wanted to provide some sort of context of pretty much overall general, but especially AB 617 of why we do this work and why it's very important that we continue to be very active on this. It's because of this. This picture is of a community that's boxed around pollution sources. It represents how really not to develop a city. And so we will continue to share this sort of picture as a reference for other cities in our region so that they don't do this mistake as well. And I also want to provide some sort of fun fact. That community there that you see, the name is Boggs Track Community, and it actually was there before all those other industry and pollution sources like the Port of Stockton and industrial warehouses. And the Boggs Track community was actually developed back in the late 1800s. Lastly, I want to say, as Catholics, one of the things when being involved in this work, one of the things that has been very beneficial and that's really changed things has been being part of local, regional, and state policy. If you have a voice and if you see in your community that there's something that needs to be fixed, or if there's something that you clearly see there's some discrepancies with like actual funding for your own communities, or it's not safe, or there aren't other sort of programs available for your own community, then it's definitely important to engage on legislation policy and work with the organizations that are really trying to work with residents on bringing in sort of a movement on civic engagement and environmental justice work. As Catholics, we are called to care for God's creation, and what more than showcasing that when it comes to speaking with your legislators, that to care for God's creation, it's really up to us that we advocate for those sort of policies, environmental policies that will just do that, that will care for our God's creation. And lastly, I want to say, please follow us on social media. Get updates of what we've been doing over the years. We have a lot of work that we're going to be doing in these next, just in 2021, but even beyond. So feel free to check out our social media, subscribe to our newsletter. It's all on our website. I want to thank you guys so much for allowing me to provide this presentation again. I do enjoy it, and feel free to reach out to me. And I do hope, I do hope that you were able to learn a lot from this, and you bring the change to your own communities, because I know it's definitely important. So God bless. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.